Cole, how are you, my man?
Hey, I'm doing great, Aaron. How about yourself?
Doing well. I know you spent some time over in College Station recently, but I know you're a film guy. You've probably also watched some film of that Auburn spring game. And amongst the people you've talked to, how much excitement is there for this Jarrett Stidham era at Auburn?
I think fans are excited. I think they have a reason to be. He gave you a glimpse of how he can make that offense different than it's been the past few seasons. I mean, he has the capability, Aaron, to stretch the field, push the ball down the field, and do it in an accurate manner. And I think what that does is it forces your safeties to stay not only back but out. And then that gives you the opportunity to utilize different weapons over the middle of the field. So it's all about matchups, numbers, trying to find space. And when you have a quarterback who can fit the ball between zone coverage down the sideline or accurately take advantage of man coverage down the sideline, then you're going to cause a lot of problems for a defense. So he showed you a few of those throws. And the thing that I'm more impressed with is his demeanor. I've had a chance to be around him a couple of times down in Auburn, and every time I'm around him, he's just more and more impressive a young man. And you need to be presidential at that position. I think that's one thing that Jalen Hurts kind of showed as a really young kid last year there in Tuscaloosa, is his teammates wanted him to be the guy. He had teammates going to the coach's office saying, this is the kid that's going to help us win. So you got to win your team over, your teammates over. And Jarrett Stidham, the way he's handling himself off the field, I think has been just as impressive as on the field. And that, a lot of people think that's been sort of the missing piece for a while. I still think, Nate Craig Myers looked really good at receiver, but I think another guy or two will need to emerge, not as an Amari Cooper or Calvin Ridley, but just as a secondary option, an Ardarius Stewart of sorts. Just a secondary option where if option A is being taken away, you have confidence that that guy's going to be able to go out and make some plays. 30, 40, 45 catches is kind of the number that I would have in mind there. So the running game is going to be fine. The offensive line, I think, has the bodies. I don't think they've necessarily worked out who the five are going to be just yet. And with Wilson Bell transferring in from Florida State, that'll probably change the course of when that will be decided and how that will be decided. But with what you saw Jarrett Stidham be able to do at quarterback, I think there's rightfully room for excitement. I mean, the guy has a lot of ability.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, think about where Auburn was last year without really a quarterback that made defenses play honest. They had a great running back in Cam Petway, that offensive line. They just didn't have a quarterback, so it's not like you need an all-pro, but I also don't want to downplay Jarrett's afternoon. He completed 80% of his passes, 267 yards, and can run a little bit too. So it looks like, we'll see what Auburn brings back defensively, but Auburn's in a really good position, maybe better so than they've been, since 2014?
Yeah, probably. I think it's so different comparatively to what's been there before. I had some folks on Twitter trying to talk to me today about, 2013 Auburn they only had one receiver then, and you can't compare this offense to 2013. They had a 1,000-yard rusher at quarterback on that offense.
Yep.
So you don't have that. But again, going back to football being a numbers game, Jarrett Stidham will be able to find advantages from a numbers perspective in different ways. He's not going to necessarily keep the backside defensive end or outside linebacker at home because of his ability to keep a zone read, but he'll keep them back from a coverage perspective, and he'll keep teams from backing off on a blitz because of his accuracy and how quickly he can get the ball out. So you play the hand that you're dealt. Auburn is going to be dealt more than likely a hand at quarterback, probably that is best suited throwing the football since Cam Newton. And Nick Marshall could just unleash the football and throw it 70 yards in the air, but intermediate accuracy was a huge problem. Sean White didn't have the ability to push the ball down the field the way Jarrett Stidham will. So you don't have to have a mobile quarterback when they can do those other things. Just like, in my opinion, Jalen Hurts, because of his mobility, he doesn't have to do as much through the air. You can take advantage of defenses in different ways. And I think Jarrett Stidham, the way he'll take advantage of defenses is forcing teams to play back in coverage and probably not being able to bring as many defenders to the line of scrimmage to slow down a running game that was pretty good last year. And that was with a quarterback that didn't, like you mentioned there, and didn't have great legs and really wasn't very scary from an arm perspective either.
Talking to Cole Cubelic, SEC Network analyst, also the host of the Cube Show on Ump Sports up in North Alabama. Auburn really took a step forward in its defense last year. Got some talent coming back. How's that side of the ball look this spring so far?
I think the middle of that defense is in great shape with, Marlon Davidson, Derek Brown, Vontavious Russell, Byron Coward moving down inside. There's plenty of numbers there. They're going to have an edge presence at some point in time. And that's not to say that Brown and Davidson can't move out and play it at certain times. They did it last year and were successful doing it at certain times. And it's nice to have some bigger bodies out there occasionally. But Kevin Steele did a great job of just simplifying things and asking his guys to go play football. And I think he'll take a similar mindset into that this year. But the Auburn linebackers, they were underrated last year. I thought Trey Williams, and after going back this offseason and beginning to watch some things, I thought Trey Williams and Deshaun Davis had a much better year. And I talked to Kevin Steele about this a few weeks ago, and he agreed. Much better year than people gave them credit for. Now, there's not a Kendall Beckwith or Reuben Foster on the team, but those guys played really good football. And I think those two coming back will help. I think if it's going to be, it might be Jay Collins, it might be Paul James III, it might be one of these incoming freshmen. Someone's going to have to give them an edge presence from a pass rush perspective. Because, you go down there, and here's the thing. We talked a lot about this on our broadcast with Texas A&M this weekend. And Texas A&M's offense, if it were to take a step back, similar to Alabama, similar to Auburn, some of these other teams, look at the offenses that you're playing against. Ole Miss is going to be really good at quarterback and wide receiver. Arkansas has probably the most underrated quarterback in the league. That kid took an absolute beating last year and had a great year. He had a great season. And he was put on his rear end time after time after time again. And I think you look at Auburn, if Jarrett Stidham turns out to be, a quarter of what we all believe that he can be. And then obviously Alabama has experience at quarterback with Jalen Hurts. Calvin Ridley may be the best receiver in the league. We don't really know what Ole Miss is going to look, or LSU is going to look like just yet. Nick Fitzgerald would have been my first team All-SEC quarterback last year, and he's a true dual threat guy. Teams are going to score points. So you better have a way to affect the pocket without having to overcommit. And these teams may be getting away from the run even more this year than they have the past few, just based on what's there at quarterback and receiver. And I'll be honest with you, Aaron, there's not an offensive line in the league, especially in the West, that I feel great about going into this season. I love Jonah Williams. I think he's amazing. I think Braden Smith at Auburn is unbelievable. There's a couple other guys in the league that I like. I think Texas A&M going to have a good left side of the line. I think Alabama, left tackle, left guard, center are going to be in good shape. But when you give me three-quarters or half of an offensive line or one side of an offensive line that's very questionable, I kind of wonder about how you're going to look for an entire season. And I think every team in the league sort of has that problem. I believe that after Alabama, maybe we'll say Auburn and LSU, the team who's going to be fighting for the next team in line that has a chance to either be competitive or finish maybe second, third in the league is going to be one of those teams that I mentioned, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, that gets like C+, B- offensive line play consistently. One of those teams that gets that because what's around them is going to be a very scary team in the SEC this fall. Because if Ole Miss gets it, State gets it, Arkansas gets it, I think they have the pieces. They're not going to go win every game, but they have the pieces to go beat an Auburn and LSU and Alabama on any given Saturday.
Cole, the nature of these spring games, they're all televised. You're not going to show anything. It's going to be pretty vanilla. But looking at first year offensive coordinator Chip Lindsay, I don't want to. I hesitate to say this because it sounds disrespectful to Chip, and that's why I'm asking you. Is he just an extension of Gus this year, or has Chip learned some things out on his own that Auburn might see some different stuff this year?
It's not disrespectful, and maybe the argument, the way you phrased it, is a little off base. I have said multiple times, Aaron, that if Chip doesn't have control and there is a juggling act of calling plays and there is an issue with who's directing that offense, especially at different times of a game, of a series, of the season, then I don't expect the camaraderie to be there, the continuity, the consistency to be there that you need to grow into a really good offense. The offense will look very different. Chip likes to stretch the field. He likes to be more balanced. He likes to push the ball down the field, take advantage of one-on-one. He likes to stretch the field. And it's really strange because back in 2009, 2010, Malzahn loved to do it. But he's just kind of gotten away from it. Some maybe because of success that he's had not doing it. But for whatever reason, Chip Lindsay's a guy that he's going to want to throw the football, especially with the quarterback that he has. So it will look different. Parts of it, most of it will probably look very similar to a lot of people. But Chip Lindsay wants to push the ball down the field. And if it's truly his, then I think he will. If you don't see that happening consistently, then I think there may be a power struggle with exactly who's in charge of calling play.
Wrapping up here with Cole Cubelic, SEC Network analyst, also host of the Cube Show on the Up in North Alabama. Cole, you spent some time over in College Station. I've talked to a few of their beat writers this spring who aren't exactly bullish on the Aggies, but what did you see? Obviously losing their quarterback, their Myles Garrett, who we don't have to tell everyone is projected to be the number 1 overall draft pick here in a couple weeks. What did you think of what the Aggies have this spring?
A lot of talent, very young, and I almost hope Kevin Sumlin, no matter what happens this year, gets another shot in 2018, Aaron, because I think they can be lethal in 2018. I think they go with one of the younger quarterbacks. If it were me right now, I think it's Starkel. I don't know what better endorsement you need than Armani Watts getting the first overall pick, and when they selected their spring teams, and taking Nick Starkel at quarterback. I mean, that what else do you want? And if that doesn't, I said it to the SID at A&M. We're sitting on the practice field and sitting there with Andre Ware. I said, Andre, who did that remind you of last year? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, sounds very similar to what happened in Tuscaloosa almost, with a guy or two going to the head coach saying, if we want to win, it's this dude. I mean, when you got defensive guys going to bat for one of your quarterbacks, then that to me is the ultimate endorsement. The receivers will be fine. Outside of Christian Kirk, who's going to be a game changer, they have some young talent, and I think that'll come along. They're better at tight end. I think Noel Mazzoni will use that position a little bit more. It's very similar to kind of what we talked about, the progression of the Auburn offense, Aaron, in that last year that run game was heavily predicated around Trevor Knight, very heavily predicated around what he does with his legs. Now, if it's Mond, then maybe you see something similar. I don't think it will be. But if it's Starkel, he's much more of a pocket guy. Kind of think of a younger Paxton Lynch. I mean, enough mobility to do some things, but not necessarily a runner at that position. And I think you're going to have Keith Ford and some of those backs who look good in the spring game be able to get it done on the ground to bring balance to the offense. I'm confident they can do that. And I think, again, the left side of the offensive line, Eric McCoy went from center to left guard. Coda Martin's going to be at left tackle. He looked pretty good in the spring and towards the end of last year at right tackle. So middle to the right side of the offensive line, a little bit concerning. And then defensively, they just got to find a way to get tough. I mean, they weren't healthy on the back end last year. That hurt them in communication. Losing Myles Garrett and Deshaun Hall is going to be big. But Jared Johnson, and they got the best pass rusher in junior college coming in. If he can be an impact guy, then I think the defense can continue to improve. I would label A&M right now as a team that has a chance to be very scary. And the front end of the schedule will help them more this year than it has in the past because they're going to have so much youth that needs reps, needs to play, and needs game experience in order to be competitive late in the season. I really do believe, I think it's week 4 and 5, Arkansas and South Carolina. That 2-game stretch will probably decide who Texas A&M is this year. If they get those two, and I bank on them getting UCLA and the 2 non-conference games after that, and then they can go 3-3 in the next 3, and I think, or the next 6, and I think they would still be considered a team that just had a good football season. They'll be dangerous. They got some players, and I think Mazzoni's great, and Chiefs got a little help with Tyron Nix there on defense now. They'll be a team that will scare some folks. I'm just not sure they're going to be deep enough or have enough veterans right now to really compete start to finish.